You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing facility, he knows keeping the line up and running is a top priority. That's why he chooses Grainger. Because when a drive belt gets damaged, Grainger makes it easy to find the exact specs for the replacement product he needs. And next day delivery helps ensure he'll have everything in place and running like clockwork. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us again on the Seafood Matters podcast. In order to help our podcast series, please press subscribe and share it with family and friends. Joining us today is Wendy Chadwick, a PhD researcher at the University of Hull, whose work tackles one of the biggest headaches in the net zero conversation, the spatial squeeze. She's digging deep into how the race to decarbonise, particularly through changes to the supply chain and infrastructure, is putting serious pressure on land use, logistics, networks, and communities. A sharp thinker with a no-nonsense approach, Wendy's bringing fresh, grounded perspective on the realities of going green and why it's not as spatially or politically tidy as policymakers would have us believe. When we hear net zero, the conversation is usually about land, cars, heat pumps, or solar panels. But what happens when the road is the sea and your engine's older than the minister setting the targets? Today, we're digging into the myth, and reality of net zero in the UK fishing fleet with someone who's been studying the cluttered seascape we're all trying to navigate. Let's go and listen. Hi, Wendy, and welcome to Seafood Matters.
Hi, Jim. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. If we'll just get in, you've taken a bit of a different route in your academia. What brought you back into it, or why this field in particular?
Well, I came from the time back in the 80s when I left school, when some youngsters went further in academia and some left school and went straight into the working environment. I came from a working class family, and that's exactly what we all did. So I left and went into the work, education. I did my education, but it wasn't at the forefront of my family's probably commitments at the time. And it was later on in life that I decided to go back and improve my education. And that led me to the University of Aberdeen, where I started a access to degree program purely out of personal development. It then led into an undergraduate degree at Aberdeen and a master's at Aberdeen. And here I am now at the University of Hull doing a PhD at nearly 60 years old.
You're giving too much away, too much information. You've lived in Northern Ireland, a region that has seen the brunt of industrial shift and economic upheaval. Has that shaped how you see the green transition?
I was born in Northern Ireland, but I've spent little of my life living there. I've probably been there for 5 years of my life. I grew up as a child in Australia. I was part of the £10 POM movement in the late 60s. And much of my young teenage and adult working life would have been in England, shaping the green transition. I lived around the area of Stoke-on-Trent, which obviously a lot of people will know was high for coal mining, steelworks, the pottery industry, all of which have now gone. Was that the start of the green transition all those years ago? Possibly. I'm more towards the blue transition and the ocean, and that was really shaped by living around Peterhead and Fraserburgh for the last 23 years until I came to Hull recently. And just being around the coast, the oil and gas sector, the fishing sector, that kind of really got me into looking at the blue transition and that movement towards our future.
You're the first to, with any connection with fishing to use the word Fraserburgh. They're usually Brochers.
Brochers and Peterhead, yes.
You're not long in Peterhead before you know why it's called the Blue Tune.
Yes, 23 years though, but I didn't ever go down the route of the Blue Tune.
Okay. You're very determined and driven. Have you always been that way? Or have these topics brought that out in you?
I've always been a very determined person in life. I was brought up with the mindset by my father that if you want something in life, you go and get it yourself. You don't hang around and wait for it to come to you. And also to take opportunities that come along when they arise, because they never come along again. They may never come along again. So for that reason, I've always been determined. And if I'm interested in something, I like to get stuck into it and to enjoy it at the same time. So yes, I have been.
And have you rubbed people up the wrong way?
I think I probably have over time, because I can be quite strong in my opinions, just like anybody. There are occasions that people would say, yes, I have. But I think as I've got older, I've got a little bit better and a little bit more tolerant and learn not to maybe do that anymore and to just accept things the way they are and not make an issue of something. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Let's go back to the start. What moment or idea really grabbed you and made you say, this is what I want to spend years digging into?
Well, my undergraduate degree at Aberdeen was geography, and I did a fishery-related dissertation, which was the Marine Stewardship Council Eco-Label. So I did quite a lot of work around Aberdeenshire, Peterhead and Fraserburgh doing that. Then I did my master's was sustainability transitions, and again I did a fishery-related thesis, which was in Shetland with aquaculture, and really everything that I did, I really was drawn towards the fishing and the marine environment. And this PhD landed on my phone one morning from a friend in Auckland, New Zealand, doing her PhD. Actually, she was a former Aberdeen Uni student. And the words were, Wendy, this has got your name written all over it. This is for you. And when I looked at it, decarbonising the fishing fleet, and it was the social aspect of those social, cultural and behavioural responses, I knew at that moment in time that PhD was definitely for me.
Doing a PhD is no joke. What kept you going through the tough days?
It is tough. I don't think anybody would say otherwise. I don't think it matters how old or how young you are. You're experiencing the same issues. I would say that a very good supervisory support team is really valuable, which is what I've got at the University of Hull, and I'm very grateful for that. I can go to them and talk about anything, and that I get that support. I think you have to have a good network around you of friends, family, even neighbours. I've bent their ear once or twice. And most of all, I think you've got to have a real passion for the topic that you're researching in your PhD, and having that passion and get you through those tough days, because you're doing it for the right reasons. And I think that's what gets you through, having that passion and desire to succeed.
Yeah, you're working in these big global challenges, but is there a personal stake in this for you? Something that makes it more than just research?
When I first looked at this question, Jim, I thought that there wasn't a personal stake involved, but having thought about it, yes, I think there is. It isn't just research that I'm going to do and then just walk away from and forget about. The whole point of doing research is that you make a difference, that you go out there and you find those problems. And the aim at the end of the day is that something will change and happen as a result of it. And that's my aim. I want something to come out of this that will better the fishing sector on this route to net zero and decarbonising.
Really interesting. And my next question, I know you said you're 5 years, you were born in Northern Ireland, you lived about 5 years there. I just feel it sticks. I'm from a small fishing village in Helmsdale, but I've been out of there for over 50 years. If anybody asks me where I'm from, I'm still a Helmie.
Yeah.
With the Northern Irish grit meets academic ivory tower, how do you balance those two worlds?
Yeah, I think I actually balance those two worlds very well, Jim. I think having 40 years work experience, what you might call in the real world, as some would say, has helped me balance those two worlds. I've got experience of dealing with lots of people from different walks of life. I know that the best way that you can get on with other people and to get the best out of them for your work is that you treat them the same as you would like to be treated yourself. You don't put yourself on a different pedestal above them, which some people may say academics do in this ivory tower. And I don't do that. I believe that the people that I am working with in my research, they are the experts, not me, and I am learning from them. And for that reason, I've been very successful on my trip in Northern Ireland for the last 2 weeks. And by just having that attitude and that approach, I think that that's where those two worlds have been able to come together and been very successful.
Very good. And what exactly is spatial squeeze, and why should the average person care about it?
Well, when we talk about the spatial squeeze, most of our transition to that green energy transition really started on the land. You think about all of our wind farms that were on farms across the United Kingdom, because they are spacious and they're probably one of the only places where wind farms can go. But in obviously recent years, attention has been more towards the ocean environment and using that ocean for meeting global commitments towards net zero. So as that attention has shifted towards that marine environment and for ocean-based solutions, we've found that many industries are now competing for that same space, which is actually becoming more cluttered as we increase, particularly offshore wind, which will rise dramatically between now and 2050. And along with that, we have conflicts within the marine environment as they all try and expand within that sector.
How do we get to this mess with a cluttered seascape?
Well, I think the transition in the marine environment has been quite quick. And what we're finding is that policy doesn't necessarily align or isn't catching up or it isn't keeping pace with that marine spatial squeeze taking place. So a lot of our policies are either outdated or they don't meet the current net zero climate change agenda. And that leads to more of a messy marine environment and more conflicts.
Is there one body meant to bring order to it all, or is everyone just fighting for their own turf?
Yes, I think that's a very good point. Although the UK government have overriding say on our policies with our marine spatial planning, we have lots of industries that have their own agendas, their own commitments. They're all expanding a lot at the same time, and they don't particularly collaborate very well. There's not a very good joined up approach, and that's what really makes things rather messy.
Yeah, I can understand that. And can electric or hydrogen tech really scale in the fleet?
There is the opportunity at the moment for electric batteries with very small vessels in the fleet. There is, however, a lack of confidence because nobody's rushing out to do it. There are some grants around that they could, but I'm hearing that some of those there was some 100% grants around, and there was a small uptake, and then it dropped to 50%, and then I'm being told that you have to find all of the money up front and then claw back your part later, and there isn't a surplus of money in the fleet to be able to do that. So there's a little bit of a barrier there. Hydrogen is one that's being talked about for the larger vessels, although.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
That they haven't yet decided what's safe and what will be used. And there is actually the opportunity for alternative fuels. But again, all of this is very early in the pipeline.
Are small boats being left behind, do they feel?
I think small boats do feel as if they're not considered as important when it comes to grant funding. Some fishers from the small scale sector have told me that all of the grants might go to larger vessels and they don't get a chance for any of the grant funding. Not everybody would agree with that. Others would say that it's accessible to all, but there are some that have obviously said otherwise.
Who's really benefiting from the low carbon technology push?
There is very little around at the moment for there to be a benefit. Most of the fishing sector that have made any changes, for example, a fuel meter or maybe a hydrogen cleaning solution, which like the Eco-Motus, which cleans the fuel and less emissions. Anyone who's changed their engines, they're not doing it, or I've not been told that they're doing it for any other reason than for reducing their fuel bill. But indirectly, they are actually reducing emissions, but that is not their primary reason for making changes.
Is there a hidden hierarchy in how space is allocated for the green transition?
Yes, I think there is. Offshore wind structures are classed as critical infrastructure on the journey to net zero and global commitments. And because they're considered critical infrastructure, they tend to be classed as being more important out in the marine environment. And I think the fishing sector would certainly agree with that. The fishing sector feels particularly displaced because of offshore wind, which causes them to have to travel further out to sea for their catch, which is often less catch, but they're using more fuel, burning more emissions, and actually their operational costs are higher. And they will say that is a result of them having to divert around offshore wind farms, which I would say is probably at the top of that hierarchy for the government, yes.
And I mean, there must be a feeling that certain sectors or regions get preferential treatment: offshore wind, coastal fishing, electric vehicle infrastructure.
Yes, I mean, Scotland is renowned for its wind. Therefore, you will find much more offshore wind farms in the Scottish seas than you will do in other places around the UK. So they might feel a little bit hard done by, particularly since we have Peterhead and Fraserburgh are very major ports up on the northeast coast. And they're having to, juggle their space with the offshore wind, which will increase. And of course, if there is an impact, it does come back on fragile fishing communities, which, if they're already impacted, then they're going to feel that much more so than maybe, larger fishing ports.
Yeah. Do you think it's fair?
I would say it's not fair. No, I think it's just the way it
Or,
appears to be going.
yeah, or just inevitable?
I think it's inevitable. At the end of the day, the government want to meet targets by 2050 and 2045 in Scotland, and they will do what they want to do to be able to meet those targets.
And the green supply chain sounds good on paper, but are they spatially viable?
Potentially not. I think a lot of decisions are made without any real research going into the process. We're making decisions and we're making commitments that we may not be able to achieve and we may not be able to meet. So I think some may be achievable, but there will always be parts of the sector and industry that just the green transition may not be achievable. And I think we need to appreciate that.
And with added pressures like electrification, port upgrades, and new logistics hubs, can the UK land and infrastructure actually cope?
I think in terms of port infrastructure, they're already finding that is quite challenging. Some of the bigger ports will probably be able to have the infrastructure in place. I know of some that have already got shore power down on the southeast, on the south coast, for like other vessels coming in from around the globe. Many ports do not have shore power, and some do. Whether or not they can facilitate alternative fuel and tanks in these harbours, for example, is another challenging thought. And some of them actually are heritage type harbours where they've been around for hundreds of years and you can't go digging up the ground and laying cables. It just may not be possible. So that is an area that needs to be addressed. And I do believe that it is being looked at and they're trying to find solutions.
Do you think there are times that we're setting up bottlenecks that'll stall the transition?
Yes, I think that is likely to happen. If we think about the fishing fleet in particular, we don't have commercially viable technology at the moment, and it may be quite some time off. They're working on it all the time. When that happens, I think is very questionable at the moment. But when and if we do have technology that is suitable, then there is likely to be a bottleneck in fitting out new vessels or upgrading or retrofitting vessels, because a new vessel can take, it can take 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And if we have, over 5,000 vessels in the fleet or whatever it might be, then there will clearly be a bottleneck at some stage, which will then slow down the process of transitioning dramatically.
What are the spatial consequences of decarbonising fast, especially for legacy industries and land-constrained areas?
There is a danger if we try to do this too quick that there will be winners and losers, but it also could mean that what we choose to do now may not be suitable in a few years' time. And that is one particular problem in the fishing sector. If the sector was to go with what's available right now, they don't know whether or not the same infrastructure is going to be there in 5 years' time. So it has to come at the same time and they have to match each other. We can't be doing one thing first and then waiting for the next. It may never come along. So I think we need to be really structured in how we process both infrastructure and vessels and technology moving forward.
Are we just displacing emissions or disruption to place with fewer political and planning protections?
Yes, we could well be doing that. There are countries around the world that are not looking towards net zero. They may not have the know-how, they may not have the funding. And so, yeah, there is a danger that's exactly what we might be doing moving forward, yes. So
what does net zero mean at sea?
That is actually a very good question that I was asked multiple times in the last 2 weeks in Northern Ireland. when they asked me to explain what I was doing, and I said, well, I didn't like to use the word net zero because people can get a little bit frightened about that word. So I tried to word the word decarbonising instead. I mean, ultimately, it's meant to be that we don't produce any emissions at sea. Whatever we release, that we bring back in to balance that out to zero. That essentially what it means. How we do it on a vessel at sea is really what all of the trials are trying to do at the moment. How can that work, and how can that work for everybody?
I mean, net zero isn't clearly defined in the seafood context.
No, you're right. Net zero itself can have very multiple meanings and definitions depending on what the sector is and how somebody might view that. For example, you might hear net zero, you might hear carbon neutral being kind of, that's that even what goes out comes back in and is balanced. And we also class that as being technically net zero. So I think that causes difficulties in how people view what it means to them and how they can possibly do it. And that's where we have problems.
I mean, land-based assumptions don't translate well to boats or coastlines.
No, that's right. And when you talk, about planning, planning for offshore wind farms is taken with land-based policies in the ocean. So, and the ocean is not the same as land, as you say. So the difficulties are different. I think we should have our own marine policy for marine industries, and we shouldn't be using land-based policies out in the sea. Another one of those would be biodiversity net gain, which is used on land, about leaving the environment in the same state at which you found it. And that can't work necessarily in the sea because it's not like for like. So they've brought in something called marine net gain, but I don't see how you can have an oil and gas platform in an ocean seabed for 70 years or an offshore wind farm for 30, 40 years and then be able to put that seabed, that land, back to the state it was when you found it, which is technically what these policies ask for. So I think that's a very grey area and one that I would follow much more closely as to how they're going to deal with that.
What does net zero actually mean when you're talking about vessels and harbours?
In the harbour, or just vessels and harbours?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody knows that all industries need to reduce the emissions that they emit into the atmosphere, and the fishing industry appreciates that, and they accept that they also have a part to play. They are all trying to figure out how they can do that, because as you know, our fleet can range from a very small 6-7 meter under 10 crab potter to your 125 meter pelagic vessel or a very large prawn trawler. Finding net zero that suits each and every one of those different parts of the fleet will mean something different. And it's not just a one size fits all. Whether that's a change in engine, whether that's a change in alternative fuel, or whether that's completely retrofitting vessels and restructuring them to burn less emissions as they travel through the water. There's lots and lots of different things that need to be considered before we can really say, what does net zero mean for each vessel or part of the fleet?
Really interesting. Funny enough, it just walks into my next point. I was going to ask you, do you think the government understands the difference between land-based and marine emissions?
I don't think as much attention is paid to the marine environment as it is on land. At the moment, the pressure is currently on the agricultural sector and reducing their emissions first, because it's well known and documented that the agri sector of beef and dairy are very high compared to fish and the fishing sector. The fishing sector emits considerably less, let's say, than the agricultural sector. So the pressure's on the agricultural side and not on the fishing side at the moment. They're probably also doing that, or not probably, they are currently leaving the fishing sector not completely alone, but they're not putting great pressure on, because they also appreciate that there is an issue with no technology at the moment, but that is not going to last for very long. And the fishing sector knows that it's coming, and eventually it will be their turn and they will get pressure. But in terms of, do they understand, the government understand? No, I don't think they do. I think this type of research that I'm doing will hopefully help them understand more about the problems that we do have in the marine environment.
And have you any access with government?
I have
Or will have?
I have interviewed government agencies and got their input. And I'd like to hope that that will continue, and I can build a relationship with government agencies to help this research move forward.
Do you feel you come across a feeling at times people just, are we just burning money chasing unworkable tech for boats that won't even exist in 10 years' time?
I think some people do feel that that's might happen, and in fact, some people would say, "Well, why would I want to spend that money when the government might change their mind in 5 years or 10 years, and I could have just spent £1 million on an engine?" So there's also that lack of confidence whether or not this will continue to be seen through to the end.
On the supply chain blind spots, I would maybe say, most emissions may be after the fish is landed.
Yes, yes. Once we get to port and those fish then go to their intended destinations, a lot of our fish in the UK, as you're probably aware, is exported. I think it's about 80%. And we import a very large amount of fish that we also eat. So it isn't just the fishing vessel, and it isn't just the processor. And they actually on land can do more than you can on a vessel at sea. They're doing things like LED lighting. They're turning down the temperatures in their refrigerants and freezers. They've got much more scope on land. They can put up a turbine for their energy, for electric, where fishing vessels can't do that. But one of the biggest problems in that supply chain are imports and exports, and the emissions that are relative to those, which are global. We're importing and exporting globally, and the emissions come from that as well, not just the fishing vessel.
Just thinking about that, cold storage, processing, haulage, rarely get attention.
Yeah, I think the processors do. I mean, I've been outside Peterhead Fish Market and I've seen all of the transportation, the lorries lined up. They're all traveling down to the docks and across Europe to transport that fish. Again, I think with transport, there is better opportunities. And I think some processors, I understand, are taking it very seriously, while other processors are not. And it was described to me as some are burying their head in the sand. But that pressure will start to come on processors from retailers. And it's starting already. So they have to do something about it. And that will only increase as we move forward.
Okay, because, I mean, why aren't we talking about emissions once fish is out of the water, as we said? Is imported fish sometimes cleaner than local catch? And does that mean we're backing the wrong horse? I mean,
it's a very big field, this, Jim, to look at. We use the word local, and I've done this a few times, and you've just used the word local. Locally caught fish can actually go to China to be processed and end up back where it started, and that happens all the time. So locally caught fish would be landed at the dock and remains in the vicinity and the region that it's landed. Because unfortunately, a lot of our fish does get exported to other locations, gutted, filleted, etc., and then re-imported back to our processing factories, and then ends up in our supermarket freezers.
The more I listen to you, I'm just thinking you would have been well pleased with me when I had the restaurant I had in Scrabster, the seafood restaurant, Captain's Galley. When I saw boats landing I would walk to the boat landing and walk back with the fish.
Mm-hmm. That's what local fish means. When you're buying it in the supermarket, you're not buying a locally caught seafood product. Even if it says it's from the northeast and it's gone somewhere else, most of the time it's gone somewhere else. And those carbon emissions linked with that are high. And I don't think that's being recognised at the moment. And the consumer definitely doesn't recognise that.
On the people in ports, I mean, who's paying the price? Fishing communities are being asked to modernise without real help.
Yes, I don't know where the money will come from the majority of ports. Some ports are owned by local authorities, and I was at one recently that was local authority owned. They wouldn't necessarily maybe have a great amount of money. I think there will be a reliance on funding from the government or a private sector to do a lot of ports and actually maybe just the fishing fleet in general. I think there will be a very high reliance on funding.
And from what you're saying earlier, describing Peterhead, the market, and it's just a buzz round the fish market. I just love it. And you feel skills risk being lost in the rush to green everything.
Yeah, this has been a conversation that I've had with lots throughout the fishing sector. We talk about these potentially new electric engines or transitioning to new technology, but we also need an existing skilled workforce to go with those, and we currently don't have it. So one of the concerns would be that if the diesel engine breaks down on the fishing vessel, that fisherman knows exactly where to go, can get something apart off the shelf, and he can probably fix it himself, or somebody very nearby will do that for him. If we're moving on to new technologies, we also need that skilled workforce to match that. And there's likely to be a gap, and there's a lack of confidence that there won't be that skilled workforce.
Is there a way to decarbonise without getting what's left of working coastal communities?
I think that's a good point. Whether or not there will be total decarbonisation, I think remains to be seen. I think we may have to find a balance, as that we can only do so much, and we're going to have to accept that there will be, not full decarbonisation. It might mean that we have to offset to balance that out at the risk of, damaging the fleet and what we really describe as fragile fishing communities that are completely reliant on the sector. Without a fishing fleet, what somebody said to me last week, what's more important, Wendy, keeping the economy going of a community or decarbonising the fleet for net zero? What's more important? We have to consider these fishing fleets. We have to consider where they come from, their coastal community, and if they didn't have a fleet, if they were forced to decarbonise and they didn't have a fishing fleet, then where's the work going to come from, and where's the money going to come from for that community to survive? So there's a bigger picture here apart from just decarbonising for net zero.
I really appreciate the depth that you're talking to real people, Wendy, because what I felt, just exactly what you've said there, has the human side of net zero been forgotten?
I think it potentially has. I think the government have agreed to meet these targets. And do I feel that it doesn't matter what gets in the way, that they want to meet those targets? I don't feel that the implications have been considered as to what it means for different parts of the country and different communities in those parts. Like Scotland, for example, is very dominant on the northeast coast for fishing. All of those communities up that northeast coast, from Peterhead, Fraserburgh, Macduff, Banff, Buckie, they're all really, that is purely fishing. Bridlington is another one. Bridlington is very, very high for the fishing sector with lobsters. I've just been in Northern Ireland, Ardglass, Portavogie, Kilkeel. Just without the fishing sector, those communities would be lost. They wouldn't have an industry. There would not be another industry to take their place. So I think communities and how this impacts them needs to be looked at much, much more than what it is being looked at.
Interesting. Should the UK be leading the way? Is the UK just keeping up or leading on sustainable seafood?
The UK was the first to announce net zero globally for 2050 in England and 2045 in Scotland. And of course, they want to be the world leader in doing that. Not all countries are doing that. I'm sure that you might be aware that the President of America, he wants to withdraw from the Paris Agreement and those global commitments towards net zero. And this filters down to, and it's filtered down to the fishing sector. If large countries like the US are not going to comply with the climate agenda and net zero, then where does that leave us as the UK? We are just, in their eyes, a small nation in a big world, trying to do big things. And if we don't have globally, if we don't have everyone doing it, what does that really mean for us as a nation and for net zero? That's the burning question, and that's what people feel.
Are we setting any international standards worth following?
Well, we are setting the standards, and the countries that do want to become net zero, that have signed up for the Paris Agreement, they're following our lead. So what we do will go globally around the world, and if it doesn't work here, and if we are unable to do it, then there will obviously be implications that will follow around the world as well.
I have to say that I feel that way myself at times, Wendy, when I hear about it all. And I think countries the size of America and China and India not doing it. I mean, what impact are we going to have?
That's right. We're just very small when we compare ourselves to those nations. And if we become net zero, we don't live in this little bubble where we can where we can just keep what we've got and what we're burning. We're a world where it's a global commitment, and if we don't have a global commitment, I'm not entirely sure that it's 100% possible.
Is there a realistic chance of the UK becoming a global leader in low carbon seafood?
I think there's a possibility that we could do that. We're working very hard as a nation. We've got lots of groups of and bodies of organisations working incredibly hard, doing different trials, trying different things. They're all working, and they are actually starting. Scientists and the industry is coming together much more than it ever has done before to try and make this work. So I have no doubt that we are trying very hard to do that. It just might take a little bit longer than the targets that the nation has set to reach net zero. It might just take us a little bit longer, particularly in the seafood sector, because like agriculture, the seafood sector is a hard to abate industry. And I just think it might take a little bit longer, but I'm fairly confident that we probably will get there one day with technology and alternative fuels.
It sounds just almost at times just almost like a minefield out there.
It is. It is like a minefield, and it's a very fast evolving minefield. Things change very quickly. What we might have had a year ago is now probably surpassed, and we've got something new. So yeah, it's a case of always having to keep up front, always keeping up to date with new information coming out, because it's changing rapidly. And there are good things. It's getting better. But yeah, it is a case of having to keep up with things to keep abreast of the situation at the time.
Is there others doing well elsewhere, other countries?
A lot of people look towards Norway and say that Norway are streets ahead of us, years ahead of us. Norway have got a lot of money that they can do these sort of things. Aquaculture is actually doing very well in the UK as well, up in Scotland, the aquaculture boats, but that's not the same as taking a large vessel out into North Sea waters in the winter. So they are doing very well, and everyone's looking to Norway at the moment. But even Norway, despite the fact that they've spent an awful lot of money and they have got some very good projects underway, they still feel that we're a little way off yet before we can find a commercially viable product.
And do you think there's any one thing the government could do, say tomorrow, that would make a difference?
I've asked this question as part of my interviews. What could the government be doing to encourage the fishing sector in particular to maybe want to go towards net zero and decarbonise? Some have said that policy could change, a change in policy could change, which might help. Others have said funding, that where there is technology available or something that can reduce or lower emissions, that by putting funding 100% up front would help. And if they did that, then they would be more inclined to make changes. Because you've got to remember, Jim, sometimes these can take quite a bit of time and they're not being compensated while they're out of the water. So that's lost time, lost earnings because they're not fishing.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of them would say if they fully funded up front what we did have available, yes, I would. So the willpower was there to do it. And if their boat was out of the water for quite a long time, if they were compensated for that, because they're not compensated while their vessel's out of the water for 4 or 5 weeks getting an electric battery engine fitted.
Have you one net zero myth that needs to be scrapped?
One net zero myth that needs to be scrapped. I think we have to be honest with ourselves and ask if it's achievable. And I don't think we know enough to be able to say that it is achievable. So I think when we say we will be net zero by 2050, no, I don't think we will. I don't think as a nation we will be. So I would say that I think they have to look at whether it's achievable before they say it's possible.
With all that, can you give me one reason why you're so optimistic?
Optimistic. I see both sides of the coin, really. I've met people in the industry who are optimistic and others who are the opposite. The younger people, or the younger fishermen, or the younger parts of the industry are more optimistic than the older. We have an aging fleet. Most of the fishermen and women that we have probably won't be fishing when that date of net zero comes around. They'll be gone by then. So they might think, why should I do this when I'm not going to be around long enough to claw back my money, or my payback time will be too long. So why would I want to do that? So yeah, I think there are two sides of the industry. Yes, I want to do it, and I will, and I'll use my money, and others that will say, no, absolutely not. I'm not going to do it, and I don't want to change what I'm doing. So I see it from both sides.
Yeah, well, that's the positive that I asked you already. That's excellent. What's one piece of data or case study in your research that shocked you or changed your own assumptions?
Well, I had a different answer to this before I went on my first research field trip. And I found out that offshore wind guard vessels that are 100% HVO fuel compliant are not using that fuel. which is clean fuel. They're using, or the ones that I was told about, are using marine diesel, the same as our fishing vessels, because they will not pay the price of HVO fuel, and marine diesel is cheaper. And I was shocked by that we potentially have guard vessels linked with offshore wind farms that are not complying with a cleaner fuel and using the same as the fishing vessels. And that doesn't sit very well with me.
Very good. Finally, if we're honest, net zero is going to hurt some people more than others. In your view, who is most at risk of being squeezed out spatially, economically, or politically? And what should we be doing about it?
Yeah, this was also formed part of my research. It was one of my questions. And I asked the question, would decarbonising the UK fishing fleet change the structure of the fleet? I.e., would it reduce the fleet or change the way vessels fished for, less emissions, for example? And many of the responses were that, yes, they would see the fleet decreasing. Lots of fishers may decide to just hang up their keys and say, no, I'm done. Larger companies will probably join together because of the costs involved, and they'll just come together. But it's highly likely to reduce the fleet, and it's highly likely to probably affect the small scale more so that are linked with our fragile coastal communities. Yes, absolutely.
So I can picture from what you're saying there, the next thing we talk about, inshore, small inshore local, is going to be back on the oars.
Yes, I think they'll probably be the ones that will suffer the most.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless we do have that funding to help them out. They're going to need that funding.
Okay. On a personal note, Wendy, which book or article do you think everyone in fisheries should read? This question I ask everybody now.
Yeah, I've actually got two. I've got them here.
You're allowed to.
I'm allowed to. Okay, these are ones that I actually I really enjoyed, and one is called Vanishing Fish: Shifting Baselines and the Future of Global Fisheries by Daniel Pawley.
Okay.
And the other one is by Hilborn and Hilborn, Ocean Recovery: A Sustainable Future for Global Fisheries.
Who's that by?
Ray Hilborn and Ulrike Hilborn.
That's interesting. Raised in a podcast with me.
Okay, well, this is one of the books that I'm going to recommend.
Excellent. That's excellent. And what if you have one word to describe the future of British fisheries?
Uncertainty.
Okay.
Yeah, uncertainty. And challenging, if I had a second word.
But you don't say, Wendy, it's always been like that.
Yes, I think it has. I think for decades, I'm hearing the same stories. We've never really made those changes over the decades, and the fishing sector they probably always feel that they're always up against it. They're always left at the bottom of the chain, if you will. They don't feel they get the same attention maybe as other industries do. And I also think that they feel undervalued, and we shouldn't be undervaluing them, because fish is a global food commodity that we always have had, and we will always want to have for a growing population globally. Fish, I think, is really important in that diet, and it's a healthy diet, and I just don't think that the fishing sector is. Well, the fishing sector would tell me that in the UK they feel undervalued. They feel undervalued for what they do.
I think it's the nature of the industry. Do you feel it's the nature of the industry from the point of view There's not one single voice. It's all, whether it's a fishing boat at sea or a guy on the fish market or somebody repairing a boat. It's all small businesses. One man or few men show, and they don't have the unity. And when it comes to them being attacked by the like of a NGO or something like that, they're an easy target.
Yes. Yeah, it would be good to see the different strands of the seafood sector coming together as one, rather than being individual sectors, really. And then they would have much more of a voice and be a stronger, they'd be stronger together. I think we're seeing a little bit of it with Fishing into the Future, bringing all of those fishermen and women around the country together to different events around the UK.
Yeah.
And actually mixing with the scientists and university academics to try and break those barriers down and make them see that, they're better all really coming together and learn from each other. Knowledge exchange. Yes, they'll have a stronger voice by coming together and sharing their problems and issues to, and if it's all across the country, then they may have a better chance of doing something about it.
I think there's nothing can beat. I've been at some of the meetings with Fishing into the Future. It's fantastic to see all sectors in the room talking together.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I was at one in York, 2024, February 2024, and it was great. People from the southwest, from the northeast of England, Scotland, whether it be lobster, whitefish, small scale, large scale, and I really think what they're doing is excellent. And I think if they continue to do that, the fishing sector will start to gel and come together even more so. And I think that's really good for the future.
It's funny. I was going to say when I asked you the question and you give the answer, I'll be 76 in a couple of months' time. When I was a kid in school, my father, they had their own, all the boats were family-owned boats. And so it was his brothers and that ran the boat. And I was just a typical fisherman's son. All I ever wanted to do was be a fisherman. My mother, I remember her saying to me, "We never had a problem with you when you were younger." He says, "We'd never police knocking at our door or any trouble like that. The biggest problem we had with you is to get you to go to school because you used to say, 'I don't need to go to school, I'm going to be a fisherman.'" And then when I did come to leaving school, I just wanted to go on board the boat. My father says, no, you're not going to sea. You're going to get a trade and pick up a trade so that you have something to fall back on because of the uncertainties in the industry. Now, I'm talking about early 60s. And so I did my trade and butchering and slaughtering, and went back and went into the day I was qualified, I left. I went into the fishing industry, and so that's what you say, almost 60 years, and it's still uncertainties.
Absolutely, and this is, we've chatted about this in my research. Fathers are actively encouraging their sons and daughters not to go into the fishing sector, just not to do it at all. They don't want them to follow them in, and that's also a reason why we don't have the younger generation coming in to the fleet with this aging fleet that we've got in terms of the fishing personnel. Some parts of the UK will say, in 10 years' time, we won't have a fishing fleet because everybody that we've got will be retired and nobody else is following through. And I'm told that's the same everywhere. But it won't be as extreme as there won't be a fishing fleet. But some parts think that it will be very, very limited compared to now, because they're not encouraging their children to follow through at all. And that's mainly because they say back in the day when they started, fishermen were fishermen. They could go to sea to fish and they loved it. And that was all they had to do. But now it's not like that. They have to be managers. They've got lots of other different things that they have to do, which has taken their enjoyment away from just fishing. And they just equally say, fishing is not what it used to be. So we don't want our children following into this industry. So that's 60 years on.
That is so true. Often use that when I talk to people now about fishermen. When I see a fisherman on the pier, just say, for example, a skipper, he's a businessman.
Mm-hmm.
Part lawyer, part accountant,
Mm-hmm.
part businessman.
Yep, they're now managers. They have to manage everything themselves, not just fish. And that's how they describe it's changed over the years.
One of the things that fascinates me from listening to you today, Wendy, I seriously mean this, it's the way you talk about this net zero and decarbonising, and you talk about how it's changing fast. And it's almost like the previous, before we had the same, almost the same thing with technology and how computers were, and how quick it was changing, how technology was changing. And it's almost like it's history repeating itself. And now it's gone from technology and we're into this subject.
That's right. Yeah, I think it is. And it's with us to stay for the foreseeable future. So it's something that we have to deal with and try and do the best we can, I think.
Well, credit to you as well with what you're doing, because there's nothing in what you've said today that I would say, oh, gee, I'm frightened about that, or I don't want that to happen, or I don't think there's anything that we should fear.
No, I don't think so. I think if technology was available and when it becomes available, if the funding is there, I think they will deal with it and they'll do it. I mean, at the end of the day, decarbonising means that they're going to save money in terms of fuel. So, yep, it's for emissions and for climate change, but they will ultimately be better off because it won't be costing them as much as it currently does. So there is a willingness to do it. We just need that technology and that funding to be available, and we're all sitting waiting for that to happen.
Do you see it coming our lifetime, or?
When I did these interviews before I went off on my fieldwork, I asked the very question, and the amount of people, and actually on my fieldwork, the amount of people, it was like a record, that said, no, not in my lifetime. That's what they said. When I said, can you ever see it happen? They went, no, not in my lifetime.
But is that people in the industry? Or?
In the industry, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In the industry, probably around about my age, yes, they were saying, no, not in my lifetime.
But if you say it's as fast changing as it is, well, maybe they'll be proved wrong too.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I could talk to different people. Somebody might say, oh, maybe in the next 5 years. Somebody might say 10 years. Somebody might say 15. Somebody might say never. We just have to wait and see what's developing. And I think we've got some very clever scientists out there and engineers working on different things. And I've no doubt we will have something that will come along. I wouldn't like to put a time frame on it personally.
No.
It's like you say, it is fast changing. They don't necessarily see that. Or they may not know what's happening in the industry. But I do see what's happening and read and listen to what's happening. So I think it is possible. But yeah, I wouldn't want to commit myself to a time limit. But you're right. It is so fast changing. It could be sooner than what most people think.
Really interesting. Where can people and our listeners follow you online, Wendy?
I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'm on LinkedIn. That's where I normally would be, or I have a university email address.
Yeah. Wendy, there's no easy fix for decarbonising the UK's seafood supply chain, but we can't keep drifting either. So I would just say thanks for helping us set a clearer course. Thank you for today. It's been really fascinating.
And thank you, Jim, for inviting me. I really enjoyed that too. Thank you.
Thank you.